What is the best, worst intimate encounter you ever had? I actually have a single best worst encounter. My friends and I threw a kegger in the woods near our houses when everyone was home for Thanksgiving during our first year of college. When the party started winding down, it was just me, my buddy, his girlfriend, and her friend. We'll call her Becky. Becky was a bit of a mess, but that never stopped her from having a good time. We were walking back to grab the keg when, out of nowhere, she pushed me against a dirt mound and started blowing my flute. She clearly wasn't all there, like most of my friends' girlfriends' friends, but I wasn't exactly complaining. I was definitely enjoying it. And then she tried to do it right there, with our friends maybe 50 feet away, and without any protective gear. That was a no from me. She lived only a couple of blocks away, so I convinced her to go there instead. We got up to her room and picked up right where we'd left off. Becky was incredible, easily one of the best of my life. She was that perfect mix of a little chubby and a lot crazy. Afterward, we just lay there for a while, catching our breath and processing what had happened. Then I felt a strange rumbling in my gut. Oh yeah. Yup. It was happening. I needed to take a dump. Becky, being the chill girl she was, pointed me to the bathroom without judgment. I said thanks, went in, closed the door, and took care of business. That's when the doorknob turned. Becky walked right in and started watching me, giggling as she locked the door behind her. What the heck? I tried to stay calm and asked as politely as possible, "What are you doing?" She just kept giggling, eyes locked on me like it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. Whatever. I figured I'd just finish up while she enjoyed the show. When I was done, stood up to leave. And she suddenly dug her nails into my arm hard. I had marks for weeks. "No, stay. It's my turn," she said. I told her I just needed to grab some clothes since they were in the other room. For some reason, she actually let me go. The second the door closed behind me, I bolted. I sprinted into the bedroom and started throwing on every piece of clothing I could find. Couldn't find my boxers. Didn't care. As I ran past the bathroom, I heard the door latch click, but I didn't dare look back. I heard a desperate wait and the sound of scurrying footsteps as I burst out the back door. I tore down the street, ducked into a random driveway, and hid, panting from fear and adrenaline, until I was sure she wasn't following me. I'd made it. I was safe, but it was 3 a.m, and I still had to walk 3 miles home. At least I found my boxers jammed in my jeans, so I hadn't left a man behind. Later, she told her friends I was a jerk who ditched her. When they came at me for it, I told them about her little thing. After that, no one seemed too mad anymore. Good times. Story 2. Worst that I can remember. I was with my ex on the couch. I was seated, and she was taking the lead. The thing is, our couch was a hideabed, and I'd slid down far enough that my back was right near the edge. As we continued, the cushion under me started to shift too. Before long, everything lined up just wrong. My chicken nuggets slipped off the front of the cushion, and when rocked forward again, they got caught between the front of the cushion and the metal edge of the hideabed. It's hard to explain unless you've seen one of those old hideabed couches, but the pain was immediate and unforgettable. It hurt, but not quite enough to stop me from trying to power through. Bad idea. With every move, they just got squeezed again. Eventually, I had to stop. Adjusting positions meant explaining what had happened, which, of course, made us both burst out laughing. Our sesh was postponed while our sense of humor and my nuggets recovered. Story 3. Worst, we were spooning in her basement watching a movie while her parents were upstairs in the living room, just half a staircase away. She was really attractive, and one thing led to another. Before long, we were doing it. Then I heard footsteps. Panic mode activated. I yanked a blanket over us and grabbed my phone, pretending to scroll through Twitter like nothing was happening. That's when her dad walked in, carrying a 12-gauge shotgun. He was totally casual about it too. Turns out he'd been upstairs cleaning his guns and was just passing through the basement to put that one back in the safe in the garage. Meanwhile, I'm under this blanket, trying not to pass out from sheer terror. He stops and says, "How are you guys doing in here? Everything all right?" I could barely get the words out. Yes, sir. Just watching a movie." I was sweating so hard I'm surprised I didn't leave a permanent outline on the couch. He nods, puts the shotgun away, and heads back upstairs to finish cleaning the rest of his collection. I didn't stick around to find out what else he had. I told her I just remembered some math homework I needed to finish, got dressed, and got the hell out of there. That was the last time I ever saw her. Story 4. All right, this one needs a bit of explanation. It was my second time. I was dating, let's call her Felicity. She was on the color guard, had beautiful blonde hair, attractive, and was 2 years older than me. She was a huge health nut, though she ate an excessive amount of salt for reasons I didn't understand. She came from a big, lively family, while my parents were total homebodies. Neither of us had cars, so finding a place to actually do it was nearly impossible. Finally, one night, the stars aligned. Her entire family was out, and I went over to her house. We were in the basement making out. It was incredible. Then slowly, things escalated when she starts making this sharp, gasping noise. I was confused, so I stopped, but she kept making the noise. When I turned her over, I realized she couldn't breathe. She was having a seizure. I panicked. I tried to call an ambulance, but my phone was dead. I grabbed hers, but it was locked with a passcode, and I didn't think about using the emergency call button. I ran around trying to find a home phone, but her family didn't have one. They were one of those everyone has a cell phone now families. So there I was, sprinting next door at 1 a.m. in my boxers and an unbuttoned shirt, pounding on a neighbor's door and trying to explain that I needed an ambulance. And please, don't call her parents. Eventually, help came. Turns out, she had a weak heart. Even getting in the mood could trigger cardiac arrest. She'd never actually been with anyone before. She'd avoided even looking at men online. She'd been eating all that salt to try to make her blood thicker or something like that. Her parents found out, and I wasn't allowed to see her again. She's fine now, as far as I know, but I haven't heard from her in years. Story 5. This all happened back in 2008 when I was 18. At the time, I was in a rocky relationship with my then-girlfriend Rachel. Things between us were far from healthy. She was emotionally involved with another guy, and our connection was strained at best. We didn't really have any intimacy, no affection, no physical closeness, nothing. It was strange, but I accepted it back then. We also had a mutual friend, the same guy she developed feelings for. She spent a lot of time with him, cuddled with him, and seemed completely infatuated. It hurt, honestly. And she would sometimes make cutting remarks about my finances or my weight. Despite everything, Rachel and I are still friends today, though that period was definitely an odd one. We broke up countless times, kept trying to fix things, but it never worked out. Anyway, I'm getting off track. Before I met Sasha, another person who would later become part of this story, I hadn't really had any serious intimate experiences. Aside from some typical curiosity years earlier, I was basically with no experience when all of this happened. So, Rachel was emotionally cheating on me with another guy, making fun of me, putting me down, and generally making me feel small. Then Sasha came back into my life. I knew her from high school, and we'd started chatting again on MSN. She asked if I wanted to hang out, and I said sure. She joked about whether we'd do anything, and for some reason, I went along with it, not really thinking about what that might mean. That evening, I went out for dinner with my dad and then met up with Sasha afterward. We went back to my place, sat in my room, and talked for a while, mostly about everything going on in my life. Eventually, the conversation turned to Rachel. I even showed Sasha a note I had written to Rachel where I poured out how hurt I felt when she made fun of my weight, mocked me, and made me feel worthless, like I wasn't good enough for her. I also admitted that I hated how self-conscious she'd made me about being a bad kisser. I used to write notes a lot back then because I hated confrontation. Honestly, I still do. As Sasha read it, I started opening up more about how much it hurt that Rachel was emotionally attached to someone else. Before I knew it, I was crying, just completely overwhelmed. Then Sasha leaned over and kissed me. My mind froze. I didn't know how to react. I was upset, confused, and emotionally raw, and suddenly this new, unexpected thing was happening. It all hit me at once, and I just sat there, caught between heartbreak and total shock. Things progressed from there. And yeah, I'll admit it, I was a jerk for cheating on my girlfriend. Rachel forgave me, though. I couldn't perform my best that night. I was having a complete mental breakdown. I'd just been talking about Rachel, and suddenly Sasha wanted to be intimate. It was confusing and heavy. Part of me thought, holy crap, I'm not worthless. Someone actually wants to be with me. But even as it was happening, it felt wrong. I wasn't into it. It didn't feel right, but I went along with it anyway. It was awful. I couldn't reach the finish line, and she took that as an insult. After we gave up, we got dressed and started talking, and somehow it got even worse. Sasha began comparing me to every other guy she'd been with. She insulted my body, called me small, and threw out a bunch of other personal jabs. Emotionally, I was wrecked, but I didn't fight back. I just sat there and took it. It made me angry, but I didn't have the strength to say anything. Then she asked if I wanted to be her boyfriend. When I hesitated and still trying to process everything, she snapped. She started yelling about how she should never have done this, how I'd used her, how I was a terrible person. By that point, I was completely numb, just sitting there, realizing how far I'd fallen and how broken the whole situation really was. So, I freaked out. I started trying to calm her down, saying that yes, I did want to go out with her, that I did want to be her boyfriend, even though I absolutely didn't. I just couldn't handle another outburst. I was scared and desperate to defuse the situation. But she started screaming that I was only saying it to appease her, that I'd done the same thing with Rachel, just telling women what they wanted to hear. I kept insisting, no, I really do want to go out with you, even though it was a lie. That finally seemed to calm her down. We walked to the store, got some snacks, and went back to my place. Then, somehow, we tried to do it again. I felt like I'd failed her the first time, that the reason everything went wrong was my fault. I wanted to prove I wasn't useless, that I wasn't worthless. But it happened again. Same thing happened, and the same wave of shame and failure washed over me. We dated for about a week after that, and in that week, she almost drove me crazy. She was manipulative, volatile, and cruel. She'd belittle me, twist everything I said, and one time even spit on me because I made a harmless joke. I finally broke up with her over MSN because I was terrified of what she might do in person. When I did, I was so scared of her reaction that I asked my dad to take over the conversation. That's when she accused I essayed her and said she was going to call the cops. Needless to say, that experience messed me up for a long time. Honestly, I think it still does. It left scars I didn't really understand until years later. That whole situation was the worst experience of my life. I'm 26 now, and since then I've only been intimate. Both times while drunk, both times awful. The last time was on New Year's last year. I was completely wasted, and it's another long story I'd rather not get into here. But afterward, I felt hollow, depressed as hell. I shut down completely and slept through the next 2 days just trying not to think about it. Or about myself. Story 6. Worst was this guy I met at a bar on my last night living in New York. When we started getting down, he tried to do stuff, but just ended up doing these strange, aimless kisses, completely missing where he actually needed to be. Then he came up, gave me about 10 seconds, and was done. Then he flopped down next to me, breathing like we just had some all-night marathon. Get ready for this. First, he rolled over and asked how many times I reached the finish line. It was hard not to laugh, and even harder not to tell him I hadn't even been in the mood. Then he told me I was the second person he'd ever been with. Then he said he was really excited about where our relationship was going. I broke his heart when I pointed to all the packed boxes around us and told him I was moving across the country in the morning. Story 7. So, it takes about 20 minutes for me to walk from my house in Canada right to the border. Anyway, I matched with this girl on Tinder who lived about 2 miles into Washington. I grabbed my passport, phone, and wallet, and she picked me up after I crossed over. We hit this sketchy bar, apparently the place to be on a Friday night. Trying to outdrink each other, we got absolutely MC hammered in under an hour. Then, some royal jerk decides to pinch my jacket, which of course has A, my wallet, B, my phone, and C, my frigging passport in the pockets. First of all, who the heck steals a jacket? Come on. But at that point, I was too drunk to care about anything except getting laid. So we take a taxi back to her place and do it. It was chaotic, loud, drunk, and fantastic. Honestly, one of my favorite experiences ever. I woke up around 7 in the morning, disoriented as hell, to her throwing my clothes at me. Apparently, she lives with her super religious parents, and if I don't get out immediately, her loving father might actually shoot me. So, she makes me climb out the frigging window, like this is some bad high school rom-com. Once I'm on the ground, I realize I have nothing. No phone, no wallet, no passport. Just the clothes on my back. I'm standing there, hungover as hell, like what the actual hell just happened? I ended up having to go through customs looking like a homeless addict, still reeking of booze. And since I have a Middle Eastern background, they pulled me aside and interrogated me for literally 18 hours and almost gave me a thorough search before finally realizing I was just a very unfortunate Canadian citizen. Story 8. Back in my late teens, after getting untangled from a difficult relationship, I met a gorgeous guy who was working down a hole at the side of the road, repairing a gas line. We got talking and arranged to meet later. He took me out and said he knew a quiet place. Turned out, it was the local gas depot. We went through the fence, but all the workrooms and offices were locked up, so he led me into a tool shed. It was dark, gritty, smelled strange, and was full of rubbish. I wanted to leave, but he started getting close with me, calling me a tease, so I decided to just get it over with so I could get out of there. As we left, he grumbled that he had wasted his time on me, said I was cold and unresponsive. I'd been dumped on a pile of unseen junk with bits sticking into my back, and he expected enthusiasm. I kept quiet, not wanting to walk home alone. When we finally got back to a lighted area, I realized I was covered in rust. Story 9. Before I start, let me stress that this is 100% true. After a night out in London a few years back, I pulled this girl and ended up back at her flat. Both of us pretty wasted. She was about 5 or 6 years older than me, and I was around 20. At the time, I had a bad cold and a runny nose, which I kept wiping, trying not to let it ruin the mood. Fast forward about 5 minutes, being generous, and it all came to a fairly average end. We both went to sleep afterward, curled up in the usual spoon. A few hours later, I woke up to a blood-curdling scream. I jolted upright to see her, and the entire bed, absolutely covered in blood. She was in hysterics. I looked down and saw that I was also covered in it. Panicking, I started shouting God knows what, just as her roommate, a guy, burst into the room, froze in shock, and then punched me square in the face. That's when the penny dropped. I tried to explain what had happened. I get really bad nosebleeds sometimes, and in my drunken state, I hadn't realized it had happened during the night. Now, my nose was actually broken and bleeding again, and I was crying. It was, without question, one of the most humiliating moments of my life. Story 10. My ex did not like intimacy, so I wasn't getting any regardless of the whole foreplay starts in the morning with acts of service thing. One morning, one of many, I woke up early and started cleaning the house. Our son began crying, so I took him downstairs and looked after him while I worked. I cleaned the kitchen, bathrooms, living room, dusted, vacuumed, the works. Then I made breakfast. I'll admit, I was always the one who initiated intimacy since she literally never did. She came downstairs and said, "Oh, you're just doing this because you want to do it later." Instant deflation. Still, I powered through and got the entire place spotless. After finishing, I got ready and left for work. That evening, I had a night class at the university and about 40 minutes between work and class. I used some money I'd saved from donating plasma, trying to pay down the credit card debt she'd sprung on me the first month we were married, to buy her flowers. She was visiting her mom, so I left them on the table as a surprise. When she got home, she saw the flowers and said, I quote, "Oh, you bought me flowers. Why haven't you done the dishes?" Literally in the same breath. Her tone went from sweet to annoyed mid-sentence. Later, I went to class, came home, and she was watching American Idol while our son slept. I started my homework. Eventually, she said she was going to bed and told me to come up for our nightly prayer. We prayed, she lay down, and I finished my homework before joining her. We hadn't been intimate for about 2 months at that point. I'm a guy. I have a drive. Sue me. I rolled over, kissed her neck, and she rolled away. Message received. I rolled back and was about to sleep when she said, "Hey, do you want to do it?" "Yeah," I said. Then she asked, "How's the corn problem?" For context, one Sunday, a church leader had gone off about the evils of corn and how it destroys families. During our first year of marriage, we'd had done it maybe 20 times, which is not much. She was never really into it, even from the start. I had looked at corn once, a couple of days before that Sunday, the first time ever during our marriage, and when she asked about it, I told the truth. After that, our intimate life went from bad to non-existent. So when she brought it up again that night, I said, "I'm fine. I haven't looked at it." She just replied, "Whatever. Have a good night." I rolled back over. A few seconds later, she said, "Fine. Get it over with." At that point, I don't know if it was anger, frustration, or just resignation, but I thought, you know what? Screw it. And I did. Worst thing ever. Life's too short. We're divorced now. Story 11. Worst, losing my V card on the beach. I met this girl in an AOL chat room. I picked her up in my AMC Eagle, and I hate to sound judgmental, she didn't exactly look the way she had described. Kind of like expecting a VW bug and getting a VW bus instead. But I was 18 and eager, so off we went. Anyway, doing it on the beach sounds like a great idea until you actually try it. Sand gets into places sand absolutely does not belong. You can catch more than one type of crab, and even in the dark, there's always the chance of getting caught, which makes you paranoid as hell. All of that was racing through my nervous mind as I awkwardly continued for about 30 seconds. Then, to really seal the deal, I farted when I finally reached the finish line. It was awful. After that night, I felt so ashamed of the whole thing that I avoided her entirely. Not my most mature move, but hey, I was a dumb 18-year-old. To top it all off, she mentioned she was really into certain religion, and when I stopped talking to her, she sent me an IM saying she'd put a curse on me. My life has been in a downward spiral ever since. Story 12. I had a friend who was interested in me, but because of how close we were, I felt uncomfortable pursuing anything romantic. We had a few moments here and there, some flirting, some romantic interactions, but I made it clear that I wasn't comfortable doing it. That didn't stop her, though. She kept pursuing me for quite a while. One night at a friend's birthday party, I got absolutely trashed. She spent the entire night taking care of me while I hugged the toilet. I don't remember much from that night, but I do remember that once I felt steady enough to leave the bathroom, I took her into the spare bedroom, and in some misguided attempt to thank her for taking care of me, I gave in to her advances. After what felt like hours of awkward, exhausting time, I finally gave up, apologized, and passed out. The next day was painfully awkward, and I'd done exactly what I said I never wanted to do: ruin our friendship. Even worse, I was dealing with depression at the time, and I ended up doing it with her a few more times after that. It never got better. It always felt uncomfortable and forced, and I still struggled to reach the finish line even when I was sober. To this day, my friends still make fun of me for it. And honestly, I doubt I'll ever live it down. Story 13. So let me start off by saying I hadn't been intimate in about a year, and for whatever dumb reason, I hadn't had a private alone time in a few weeks either. Probably something to do with being new to dorm life. Anyway, I'd met this girl I really liked. We were into the same video games, the same music, even the same food. We'd hung out a few times before, but tonight was the night. We were finally going to do it. We went out for a few drinks, then hit up a local rock club. Both of us were pretty tipsy, but not full-on drunk. We stayed out until about 2 or 3 in the morning, and when we got back, she asked if she could stay over. Bingo. Of course, I said yes, and we basically sprinted from the cab straight into the dorm. We started messing around, and I jumped up super fast to grab a rubber. Big mistake. I got the worst head rush imaginable, and my nose started bleeding like the elevator scene from The Shining. Total mood killer. She was cool about it, though. 20 minutes later, the bleeding had stopped. I was cleaned up, and we were ready for round 2. We skipped the play this time. I grabbed the rubber from my dresser, and just as we were about to finally start, the fire alarm for the entire building goes off. At first, I hoped it was a drill. Hell, I even prayed it was a drill. But no, it kept blaring. So we had to get dressed and head outside to the assembly point. It was 4:30 in the morning, freezing cold, and I was standing there exhausted and still sporting a stiffy in front of the whole dorm. It sucked. Thankfully, she found the whole thing hilarious and decided to stick around. We're still together, 4 years later. Story 14. I've had a lot of partners, but these two definitely stands out. Best, hands down, the Hawaiian girl I met while traveling for a marathon in Victoria, BC. She was gorgeous, confident, funny, and also just passing through town. We matched on Tinder, grabbed some beers, and spent about 4 hours in this little pub making up stories about the people around us. We ended up back at her hotel, and she was incredible, twice that night and once again in the morning. Then we said goodbye and went our separate ways. No phone numbers exchanged, no way to reconnect. Still, best single night of my life. Worst. There are a few contenders, but this one takes the cake. I was in the mood and not exactly picky about who I was going to sleep with. I met a girl on Craigslist who was also just looking for a casual meetup. She was a bit heavier, but that wasn't the issue. The problem was she clearly didn't take care of herself. Minimal grooming. And the smell. It honestly seemed like she hadn't wiped after her last trip to the bathroom. My mood died instantly. I made a half-hearted attempt to keep going, but I just couldn't do it. I told her I wasn't feeling well and asked her to leave. As soon as she was gone, I blocked her number. Story 15. Worst and best, all within about 5 minutes of each other. Please, don't judge me. College messed me up. So I invited this guy over for a one-night stand. Turns out he was hanging out with his friend. I told him to just bring the friend along, but he said his buddy would only come if he got a favor in return. I figured, sure, why not? So the first guy and I end up in my bed, and the second guy's on the couch below us watching a movie. The first guy is bad. Not needs a little coaching bad, but painful. Thinks he's a Casanova, but isn't kind of bad. We go at it for maybe 10 minutes, and I'm trying to be a good sport, but he can see on my face that I'm not exactly having a great time. Eventually, he apologizes, and I'm doing my best to laugh it off and not make him feel worse. Meanwhile, the second guy, who's heard this entire exchange, pipes up and offers to give it a try. I look at the first guy, he shrugs, and I say, sure, go for it. The second enters, and holy hell, it's like night and day. Fastest, most incredible 15 minutes of my life. I'm lying there afterward, grinning like an idiot, when the first guy suddenly asks if he can try again. Maybe his pride kicked in or something. Fine by me. I tell him to go for it. Unfortunately, it's just as bad as the first round for both of us. We all said our awkward goodbyes, and that was that. And now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, I'll probably regret telling this story someday. Story 16. When I was 18, I had just started a new job. They sent me to another city for 2 weeks of training, 5 days a week with weekends off. They put me up in a 3-star hotel and basically told me that as long as I didn't break anything or order room service, I could do whatever I wanted. After a few days, I got pretty bored and ended up calling my mother a few times just to talk. Then I got a call from one of her co-workers, a 27-year-old divorcee I'd met a few times before. She was friendly, funny, and a bit unpredictable. She said she was in the same city helping her sister move, and we chatted for a bit. When I told her the name of my hotel, she said she was staying there too and told me to drop by her room over the weekend if I got bored. I didn't think much of it and agreed. On Friday evening around 7, I texted her, and she told me to come by. When I got there, she was dressed casually and watching TV. We started talking, joking about the show, and just hanging out. After a while, she leaned on my shoulder, and things started getting complicated. Let's just say the situation quickly went from lighthearted to extremely awkward, confusing, and slightly painful. Without getting into details, something unexpected happened that left me with a sore back, an injured ego, and somehow, an eye infection. The next morning, I woke up with full-blown pink eye. My company decided to send me home early from training. When I got home, my mother was acting strange, kind of cold and irritated. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me her friend had already filled her in on what happened. That conversation was, without a doubt, the most uncomfortable talk I've ever had with my mom. To top it all off, because I had to leave early, I couldn't finish the training, and they ended up hiring someone else. Story 17. I was definitely someone's worst. I just found out my girlfriend had been sleeping with another guy from our friend group. They're married now. I was super butthurt, so I went out drinking and ended up bringing home a random hookup to my parents' house of all places. We were in my room, making out, loud and drunk, when my sister started, pounding on the wall from her bedroom next door. I ignored her. Then she burst into my room, crying hysterically. She thought I was cheating on someone, and started yelling at me to go to bed. I was belligerent and furious that she'd barged in, so I lost it for a minute. Eventually, she left, and the girl and I went back to making out. Then, right in the middle of it, I started puking. All over her and the carpet. That's when my mom came in. The girl was hiding under the sheets, but her feet were sticking out. My mom took one look, and I kid you not, said, "Who's the girl?" The girl sighed, stuck her hand out from under the blanket, and gave a little wave. My mom just left the room. Despite everything, I begged the girl to stay and keep going. And somehow, she did. It was awful. Then I passed out. Kim, if you're reading this, I am so sorry. Story 18. Worst was when I hooked up with a girl at a friend's wedding. I was going slow, just working it in, when she said, "Just go in as far as you can." So, I did. She held me there for a second, then let out a tiny gasp and went completely limp. Then she said, "What, you can't do it?" "What? Aren't you done?" "Well, we just started and—" Before I could finish, she was already kicking me off. "Well, I guess I just know what I like. You can take care of yourself now, right?" I have never been with anyone so selfish. It was exactly how I imagined most girls in my high school felt. 30 seconds, and the whole thing was over. The most disappointing part was that she was so hot. Story 19. He had talked himself up so much, that should have been my first clue. When it came time to actually doing it, he had the worst breath I've ever smelled. Terrible body odor. Even though he'd just taken a shower, and he kissed like an oxygen mask. Then he couldn't get it up, and when he finally did, he apparently started thinking about his ex-girlfriend and began sobbing. Never again. Story 20. A few years back, I was on a dating website and met a girl I'll call Stephanie. She was a little overweight, but still a very cute girl. We texted for a few days, just getting to know each other, and then one Wednesday night she texted me saying we should meet up to make out. I said hell yeah, and jumped in the shower. It was around 10 at night, and let's be honest, two 21-year-olds weren't meeting up just to kiss. We agreed to park our cars on the side of a movie theater a few towns over, where she lived. I was driving a Ford Explorer at the time with third-row seating, so I shut off the car and we climbed into the back seat. Within about a minute, I was taking things a little further. Stephanie paused and said something like, "I thought we were just going to kiss." I told her that was fine, but honestly, I figured that was just code. We were 21 after all, and I'd even brought protective gears just in case. Then she grinned and decided she wanted to blow my flute. Hell yeah. But this, my friends, is where the tragic love story takes its fall. After about a minute, I catch a whiff of something that unmistakable smell. At first, I assumed she just farted. No big deal, right? Until I realized the smell isn't going away. In fact, it's getting worse. Trying to play it cool, I casually reach over to hit the window switch, only to remember I'd turned off the car and my keys were still sitting up front. No escape. Just as I'm about to politely call it quits, get started. And being the man I am, I decide I'm going to see this through. It goes on for 45 minutes straight before my body finally gives me what I can only describe as a pity end. We part ways. I head back to my apartment, still dazed by the entire ordeal, and immediately tell my roommate, who's also my best friend, to come out to the car. I make him smell what just happened. He instantly starts dry heaving while I explain in detail the horror I had just endured. Story 21. I live in the US and had an early flight to Ecuador where I was heading to study abroad for a semester. I run competitively, so to get my daily miles in before the flight, I decided to go for a run at 2 in the morning. It was summer, warm, breezy, and quiet. About 3 miles in, I came across a group of people standing in the middle of the road. I live in a small rural beach town, so the roads are narrow and empty that time of night. They started yelling things at me, which, honestly, I get. Seeing someone running full speed at 2 a.m. would probably catch anyone off guard. My run was an out and back, so about 25 minutes later, I was heading the same way again. And they were still there, sitting in the middle of the road. When I got closer, 2 of the girls stood up and stepped in front of me, blocking my path. I stopped, unsure what was going on. They started asking me all sorts of random questions, and one of them said she wanted to run with me. Turns out, she had something entirely different in mind. About 10 minutes later, at 3 in the morning, we ended up on the golf course nearby. Since I don't exactly bring rubbers on my runs, we didn't go all the way, but we did just about everything else. Eventually, I realized I was running out of time. My parents were supposed to drive me to the airport at 4, so I had to book it home. I ended up sprinting the last 3 miles back, showered as fast as I could, and left the country shortly after. Not exactly the best encounter I've ever had, but definitely one of the weirdest and most unforgettable experiences of my life. Story 22. Best. I was with a girl I'd known for a few years, someone I'd had a crush on for a long time but had always been too much of a coward to actually hit on. She worked as a barista, and one day when I was getting coffee from her, she asked me what my birthday was so she could add it to her calendar. I told her I never told anyone my birthday because I didn't like celebrating it. That kicked off a year and a half of her trying to figure it out. She didn't know my family, my friends wouldn't tell her, the few who even knew, and I never let her see my ID. At some point during all of this, she found out I liked her. She told me that if I finally told her my real birthday, she'd go on an actual date with me. I wanted that more than anything, so I gave in and showed her my ID. Turns out my birthday was the next day, and she was thrilled. The next day, she invited me over to her house and said she was throwing me a birthday party. When I got there, it was just the two of us. She handed me a cupcake, sang happy birthday, and after I ate it, she hugged me and started making out with me. Things escalated quickly, and before I knew it, we were in her bedroom. It felt unreal. The weirdest and also the best part came after the second round. At the end, she screamed, "Happy birthday," before collapsing on bed. We both just passed out afterward. We never ended up dating, but we've met up a few times since. Still, that night was unforgettable. Story 23. So one evening, I brought a girl home while very drunk. Fortunately, we were both hammered and passed out, because when I woke up, she was not nearly as good looking as drunk me had remembered. A few weeks later, she showed up at my place super drunk. I couldn't send her home. In her state, that would have been a death sentence. I got her a blanket and left her on the couch to sleep it off, then went to bed. About 10 to 20 minutes later, I woke up to find her on my bed, biting me, hard. Not the, "oh, that's nice" kind of bite, but the, "ow, what the hell, that hurts" kind. I pushed her off and told her I was going to the bathroom. I went in, closed the door, and sat with my back against it. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, she tried to open the door. I stayed there for nearly an hour before finally coming out. Thank God, she had passed out. I woke up before her in the morning and kicked her out once she was sober enough to drive. I've since moved, and she never got my new address. Story 24. I'm tied for worst. One of my exes called me around 5 in the morning. Surprisingly, I was already awake. She said she wanted to stop by, and I told her to come over. She showed up, and of course, we ended up doing it. This was an ex from over 5 years ago, and the whole time I was thinking, I can do so much better. Sleeping with her just made me realize how much I'd grown and matured, and how I wasn't into her type anymore. I vowed never to sleep with her again. Then, the weekend after that, I met a girl through a mutual friend. My friend brought her and another friend over, and we were drinking at my place. The girl was quiet at first, but as the drinks flowed, she loosened up. By the end of the night, she was ready to go home with me, and I was definitely down. And when we started, the most foul stench filled the sear. Oh my God, I didn't know what to do. The smell was unbearable. I just fell backward and told her I couldn't do it. She asked why, and I said I was too drunk. That was about a month ago, and she still calls and texts me, constantly wanting to meet up. No way. Story 25. Worst. I'm a married woman now, but back in my days of binge drinking and random hookups, I was at a party where the guy I had a crush on left with one of my friends. I was upset and started drinking heavily. At some point, I remember making out with this super unattractive, rude, and generally awful guy. My memory blanks out until I suddenly come to on bed at my friend's apartment. Horrified, I jumped off and ran out of the room, frantically looking for my friend. I found her on the balcony with another male friend. I sat down cross-legged and told them they needed to get that guy the hell out of there. They did, and I passed out half-clothed on the balcony. I'm pretty sure it was the worst experience for all of us. Story 26. Now, I can finally tell this story. I met this guy at a party. We'll call him C. He seemed really cool and had a bit of a southern accent. I pretty much spent the whole party talking to him. We laughed, drank, smoked, and laughed some more. It was great. A few weeks later, we actually went out on a date, drinks at a local bar. I showed up and he was already there, which was nice, but the magic from the party was gone. The conversation was awkward and stilted. He talked a lot about the girl he'd just gotten out of a 7-year relationship with back in Georgia. Still, I'd had a few drinks, and he was hot, so when he suggested we go back to his place, I figured, why not? We got there and started making out, which was fine, until things fell apart. He started pawing at me like he'd never seen a pair before. He was thin, but very hairy. Not normally a problem, but his body hair was coarse, thick, and honestly kind of strange looking. I remember thinking, this feels like hooking up with a bear, between the hair and the clumsy pawing. It was obvious he had no idea what he was doing. He basically slobbered all over the place, nowhere near where he should have been. I tried to guide him, both verbally and by moving, but he resisted every suggestion. Then he tried to go in without any protection. Absolutely not happening. I had to demand that he use one, and he got all sulky about it. I should have left right then, but I didn't. Partly because I'd had too much to drink to drive home safely. Not that it lasted long anyway. I tried giving him the benefit of the doubt and gave it another go in the morning, and same result. 10 seconds and done. I left and never spoke to him again. I now refer to him as the bear slug, because being with him was like being mauled by a bear and attacked by a slug at the same time. Definitely my most regrettable hookup. Edit. I stayed because I'd had too much to drink and was trying to be nice. I should have just called a cab. But we all make bad decisions when we're a bit hammered and haven't been with anyone in 6 months. Story 27. I had just broken up with my boyfriend of nearly a year and a half. He never treated me well, never made plans, ditched me when I made them, acted like I didn't exist when we weren't together, and on top of it all, couldn't even say he loved me. Despite me saying it at 6 months, I finally had enough and broke it off. Not even a week later, he's tearfully confessing his love for me. Blah, blah. Whatever. Way too late, a-hole. So, I was emotionally exhausted, angry, and heartbroken. I'm a modern dancer, and about a week after the breakup, I had a performance. He actually showed up, brought me flowers and a card, things he never once did while we were dating. And it only pissed me off more. By the time the cast party rolled around, I was ready to get properly drunk. At the party, I met this guy who was in town dancing with another company that was sharing our event. I'd seen him hitting on pretty much every woman there before me, but I was wasted and angry, so I figured, screw it, I'm doing this. Time to forget my ex. It turned out to be the worst I ever had. The guy wasn't well endowed, which would have been fine if he'd had any idea what he was doing, but no. It was just the same boring no rhythm, no variety. We stayed in practically the same place for almost 2.5 hours. Honestly, I would have been impressed with his stamina if I hadn't been on the verge of falling asleep. By the time 5 in the morning rolled around, I told him, I'm done. I need to sleep. I have dance again tomorrow. But he just wouldn't stop. Every 10 minutes, he'd try to start again, no matter how many times I said no. It made me so uncomfortable. I was beyond relieved when he finally left around 9 to catch his flight home. Unfortunately, it didn't end there. At some point in my drunken haze, I'd given him my Facebook info. The next day, he sent me about 8 desperate messages before I finally replied. I told him we should just be friends, but he wouldn't hear it. Kept saying he missed me, getting all sappy and even a little pissed when I said I wasn't interested. Eventually, I snapped and told him, you don't know me, you can't miss me. You just miss having someone to do it with. I was a one-night stand. Don't pretend I mean more than that. Then I blocked him. So not only he was terrible in bed, but he turned into a clingy Facebook creeper afterward. Thank God, he wasn't from my city. Story 28. I went on a date with a guy I met online. He'd sent me some old photos, years old, as I would soon learn, and instead of the somewhat husky guy I was expecting, what showed up was basically Peter Griffin, only more. So, he had to be around 350 pounds. I suffered through dinner with him, trying to be polite, while he practically inhaled everything on the table. It was honestly hard to look away, like watching a nature documentary about feeding time. Afterward, he asked if I wanted to go for a drive. My brain screamed no, but for the first and only time in my life, my judgment was completely overridden by my other brain. I'd been on a 2-year dry spell, so yeah, I said yes. We drove up into the woods and pulled over somewhere secluded. We chatted for a bit, but I was already totally unimpressed. The guy was 26 and driving his mom's Volvo station wagon. Still, he got out, lifted the tailgate, and invited me to join him in the back. I obliged. He initiated things, and it was okay at first, but straight downhill from there. When he was done, I zoned out completely until I finally made it back to my own car. I drove home like a bat out of hell, chain-smoking half a pack of cigarettes in 15 minutes. Once home, I realized I had a huge purple bruise on my thigh, and a few hours later, I discovered that the rubber had gone missing. Turns out, he was so small that it got lost. I found it, eventually. Since that night, I've always made sure to think with my big head, even when I'm running dry. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.